Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, I'm excited today to have with me a guest who dipped his toe in the political arena in his state of Pennsylvania, and I really enjoyed reading his book. Matthew Ferrence is author and writer of the book, I Hate It Here, Please Vote for Me, Essays on Rural Political Decay. Matthew Ferrence lives and writes at the confluence of Appalachia and the Rust Belt. He teaches creative writing at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. I want to welcome Matthew Ferrence to Chatting with Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm really looking forward to the chat.
I am looking forward to it too, Matt, and thank you for writing this book and coming on. And folks, you know, I'm always honest with the audience. I don't usually do a lot of political shows because I just didn't have the opportunity till recently. And I'm really glad that I have this opportunity to talk with you, that I read your book, and I found it very eye-opening for me because I really, basically, Matt, I'm not a political person. You know, I don't do a lot of, I don't do at all on my Facebook page like politics. So I'm kind of quiet about that, but it's good to learn, and it's good to have an open mind. And when you write about your experience, I have to tell you, you should be a comedian about some of your stuff.
You.
Really funny. So you have like a little bit of a comedy flair to your writing. I believe, but that's good because comedy, you know, humor, we need humor.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, especially in today's world. What motivated you to write your book?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with like what motivated me to become a political candidate, and I'll try to be brief with it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that too afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so they sort of connect in some ways because the book is very much about the reason I ran in a context where there was no chance that I would win, though at certain points in the campaign I thought I might have a chance. So the context of that is I'm a fairly progressive Democrat living in a rural portion of Pennsylvania that has essentially never voted for Democrats since the Republican Party began. But the primary reason I ran was a little bit personal and petty, that the state representative who I challenged said that he didn't think that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania should give financial aid to any college student who studies, in his words, poetry or any other pre-Walmart major. And
goodness.
Yeah, I know, right? and then when that came out and people were rightfully annoyed, disappointed, he apologized to Walmart, not to the poets or the students. And in fact, when I was a candidate, he continued to rail against pre-Walmart majors and poetry. Egyptian poetry came out, women's studies, all of these things being useless. And so that, you know, my primary motivation was that made me angry as a creative writing professor, but more so as someone who grew up in a rural county about 2 hours away from where I live now in Pennsylvania, but the same kind of county. Grew up on a farm, a high poverty area. Where I grew up was former coal country, and up here it's former manufacturing country. I recognized his line was actually a declaration about the value of the people in a rural space, and that they don't deserve to have dreams. They don't deserve to study poetry or art or whatever it is that they want to study unless it'll make money for whatever, the big enterprise that's in control. And that's why I really ran, because where I live, a third of the people, or a quarter of the people rather, in the city live below the poverty line. The county itself ranks in the bottom third of per capita income in Pennsylvania, and there are tremendous interventions that could help. And one of my primary platforms, which I think connects with your show nicely, was healthcare, and healthcare for all in some ways, because a lot of people can't afford it.
Yes.
So they're sick, right? And so politics and life come together. So the reason I wrote the book, though, was I lost, and there's nothing surprising about that. And the book's not really about the act of losing, but it's about how storytelling makes us losers before we begin, and how thinking about the stories that control our thinking, that circulate in culture, might actually give us a way out of the terrible political divide we're in right now, that I think is everything about dark storytelling and a lot less about policies than people think. So I wrote the book to get at what it means to be me. I'm a memoirist who grew up in a place like this, but the values I have come from rural America. They're not aberrant from rural America, even though in the campaign that was, I was considered an outsider. So that's kind of the genesis of the book, both as a literary artifact and as a political motivation.
Well, I think that's great that against the odds that you were facing, that you ran. I mean, that takes guts, to put yourself out there. And just the fact of putting yourself out there and knowing that people are going to be digging up whatever they can dig up about you. And, Matt, that's the thing about politics now, okay? I'm going to be 67 in December. So here I am, middle-aged. And so I've been through quite a few elections. I didn't really pay attention when I was younger. But now, being older I have never seen such nastiness in politics in my entire life. Like, I just want people to go back to being decent human beings on both sides. Yeah. Okay, I'm talking both, both sides. Stop slinging the dirt and the mud, and stop calling each other names, and talk about what freaking policies you're going to do to help us. Yeah. It just distresses me, when I hear the talk. This one's stupid. That one's, you know what I mean? It's just, there's no need to degrade somebody. Yeah. Because you're just making yourself look not good.
Yeah. Well, what's I think even more frustrating about it is that it's really successful. And so, like, the reason it's done is, and I think that it's important for us all to think about this, is that I agree with you 100%, but it's not an accident that politics has become so virulent, because the people that study this, who work for political campaigns, know that if you can create this monstrous other, that you can use fear and anger and outrage to leverage it for votes. And so it's not just that we need to get back to being nicer to one another, which we do, but we need to recognize that, like, this is not accidental. This is strategic, and that we should all be outraged at what politicians who do the insults and just the crassness that has emerged lately. They're not doing it by accident. They're not demonstrating authenticity when they do it. They know what it will mean at the ballot box, and they're not interested in the policies that could persuade you. They're interested in just making themselves look better than the alternative by making the alternative look like the devil, and like that's rhetoric we literally hear.
Well, you
that's
mentioned
the storytelling I'm talking about. Sorry, please.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. Well, storytelling is very important. I say in the caregiving world, and I've been telling people for years, we need to tell our stories. We need to share our experiences, and storytelling and sharing our experiences brings us closer together, because, I mean, you're a professor at college and you are surrounded by young people, but a lot of young people and older people think, oh, I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only one who's experienced this. And they're not, which is why I tell people, I tell their audience that, you think you're alone, but you're not. There's plenty of other people in the same situation or feel the same way that you do. They just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But I've gotten a bigger mouth in my old age, so
But
I'm
I think
much
that's
more
so important. Yeah, and because I mean, I think a lot of us grew up with small mouths, right? And
Yes.
you don't talk about what hurts you, and you don't talk about the struggles you have, and then so you feel very isolated. And I'm thinking of caregiving specifically here because I have family members who are in that context right now, and it's very difficult to navigate because it's literally an isolation, and it is emotionally isolating because you do feel like I'm against the world and no one else is really experiencing that, except there's people all over doing the same thing. And so the analogy to politics is the same way. What I've experienced, even with this book, is people coming up, fellow rural folks saying, yeah, I feel exactly this way and I feel very alone, or younger people, students, who come up and say, yeah, I've been made to feel like I can't stay where I'm from, and I love where I'm from, but they tell me I'm not welcome. And it's nice to know that there's other people who will welcome you and have felt the same way, because it's not necessarily a solution, but knowing you have allies makes it easier to bear the difficulty so that you have the capacity to come up with the solutions together.
Absolutely. You mentioned healthcare, Matt, and I'll tell you what, we could do a whole another show on that.
Yeah.
The healthcare system is broken. I've been saying that for years. Now people are starting to say it. I mean, I've always been ahead of my time. I really feel that, I really don't know what the answer is. I wish there was healthcare really for all, that you didn't have to be broke to get help, to get assistance. And it's really a shame what you have to go through now. When my husband was disabled, he had early onset Alzheimer's, so he had to go out on disability. Then when he became 65, his company dropped us. They said, we're not covering you anymore. So thankfully, Matt was already on disability, so he had Medicare already, and then I got the supplement. My son is on Medicare, Medicaid. I was left high and dry.
Yeah.
And I had to pick New Jersey Get Covered. Though it might not have been New Jersey Get Covered at that time, but the federal program. And I'll tell you, it's not cheap, and the out-of-pocket is outrageous. It's just outrageous.
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about this from a political angle, and this was the primary plank of the platform that I was running on. And for me, it was, I had, like a lot of Americans, a lot of human beings, the experience. I was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2016, and so I had to have brain surgery and radiation treatments. And I have good insurance through, or what counts as good insurance these days. And it still took us, I think, 5 or 6 years to catch up to the debt we incurred from co-pays and out-of-pocket, and that was with good insurance. So I got to thinking about that, and so there's a program that's been proposed for a long time in Pennsylvania that would be a universal single-payer health care that would be tax covered, right? Like, so taxes have to pay for it, and so it's absolutely true. I'm getting to storytelling here. It's absolutely true. Your taxes, your taxes would go up to have this plan. Everybody's taxes would go up, except if you do the numbers, your cost for health care would go down dramatically. So even though you'd have more taxes to pay, your outpay of money would be a lot lower, to the tune of, in my own situation, I would save personally, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's somewhere in this ballpark, $6,000 a year, paying the additional tax, but relieving some of the burden of the co-pays and co-insurance we pay. My employer would save like twice that. So between the two entities in that situation, even with our taxes going up, we would be saving like $15,000 a year. And that would be true across the Commonwealth, across the country, that the statistics are that something like 90% of Pennsylvanians under this plan would pay less or the same that they're paying now, and everybody would have coverage because you create this, the pool is bigger. And the storytelling doesn't let us get there because the storytelling ends with, it's taxes. Your taxes will go up. We can't support an increased tax. But the next line of the story is, but you'll be paying less. And I recognized, why can't we get behind this? Because in a rural area where people are in poverty, can't afford health insurance, it's a game changer. If you're in a crappy job that you don't want to be in anymore, it's a game changer. You can quit and start your own business because you have this health care. And I recognized, the stories come back to character motivation. Who wants what? And we talk about healthcare if it's about getting healthcare, but it's not. It's something else, and we need to think about why people who oppose coverage for everybody would oppose it. It's because it's financially beneficial to them. It's beneficial to a company to be able to throw your husband and you off their health care because they make money. It's beneficial for a company to have you on the hook with health care because you can't quit the job if you're treated unfairly because it's not a marketplace. Because if I want to, I like my job, so I'm not talking about them, but if I wanted to quit my job, my bet is against my own life. I'm saying I'm okay with not being able to afford brain surgery. So there alone, I don't see why single-payer health care isn't a bipartisan issue because it would save companies money, it would save individuals money, it would have positive outcomes for people's health, it would have positive outcomes for all of the little issues people talk about. But it's the story, nope, that's a new tax, we can't do it. I would add to that, we're already paying a tax, and we're paying an unrepresented tax to health insurance companies. They can set the rates however they wish, really. So a little bit of a long story there, but I think that's where politics, experience, and narrative start to combine, and a lot of people oppose something that if they really could think about what it would mean, they would not oppose it.
Yes, you're right. People hear, it will raise your taxes, and they're like, oh, no, we don't want that, but they don't look at the whole picture.
Right.
That's really, what you're saying, and it's true. But when they would look at the whole picture, they were open-minded enough to look at the pros and cons because it's really a big mess. And it's like I said, it's a whole other show. Are you okay now with your health?
I am, right, as far as we know. I chuckle about that, but I had my treatments, and the dark side of it is that they couldn't remove the tumor because of where it was, but we zapped it and we monitor it with MRIs, and that was 8 years ago at this point almost. So everything is as it should be, and it's just a reminder of mortality instead of something that has impact. I mean, there are always long-term impacts, but in general, my health is very good, so I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the care that I was able to get because of where I live, and that I'm fortunate enough to have the insurance that would allow me to go. I actually drove down to Pittsburgh, which was about an hour and a half away. My insurance allowed me to do that. And that was probably life-saving for me.
Yeah. People don't realize that your quality of life a lot depends on your quality of your insurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of what kind of treatment, and everything that you could get. Matt, I have to ask you this because I'm sure the audience would want to know, what did your colleagues and family think of you running for office?
Everybody was really supportive. And, part of it would be, from my colleagues in particular, there's a frustration, and this happens in a lot of rural places where there's a university or a college, is that those who wind up moving and making their lives in these towns are often made to feel like outsiders who don't have a voice. And so they were very supportive of it. My family was really supportive too, and two things come to mind with that. One is that it's not easy being in the same house as a political candidate, and so my direct family of my wife and kids, they had to, and the kids were kind of young ish at the time, so I don't think it had too much of a negative impact. But just my dinner table conversations were really boring because all I could talk about was politics and running. But then on top of that, I see this theme of like care for other people in our conversation today. My wife had to experience the hatred that came at me as a candidate, and pretty virulent stuff, as you might expect. That's hard for her to bear as well. And so that she was willing to experience that, right, to like have to suffer the hurt of someone that she cares for and loves, was a huge act of support. The other thing that I'll say is that a lot of my extended family are Republicans and continue to be Republicans. They're a different kind of Republican than is dominating politics these days, and they were very supportive of my campaign as well. And I come from what I think is an open-minded, deep-thinking Eisenhower Republican family, is the way I describe it. And I value that support, and I see in it the hope, because they're not the only people in the Republican Party that think that way. And I'm hopeful that that party can get back to what they used to be able to be, so that there can be healthy debates, and there are always going to be debates in politics, healthy debates over the mechanics of policy instead of the unhealthy debates about, who deserves to be a human being.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I was my son and I went to see the movie about Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And you see Tip O'Neill talking to Ronald Reagan saying, after we could go for drinks, like after 6,
yeah,
we're not Republican or Democrat. We're friends.
Yeah.
And they were friends. It's like, it's just this viral, I don't know what you would call it, hate, dislike, but it's just, politics is, not that it was ever nice, but not like
right.
it is now. It just went, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, it just really went, it needs to get back to being somewhat normal again.
Yeah.
That could ever be, where people are, civil to each other. Man, everyone wants basically the same things.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. No, and this is something I think about a lot, and I write about it in different ways, and that I try to empathize even with folks who don't just disagree with me, but who maybe are participating in the most virulent strains of politics that we have right now. And I think, again, this goes back to like thinking deeper to motivations. And what we have failed politically as a nation, and I include the Democratic Party in here very much, is we've failed to listen to people expressing hurt. And there are manifestations of that hurt right now that are not actually about the thing that hurt them. They think it is, but it's not. And so, like, the bigotry and racism that we see is a manifestation of a real hurt that has nothing to do with what they're saying. But, the example would be, where I live, it's hard to make a living, right? The wages are low, and we have been abandoned economically, and no one has been offering help, and no one's listening really to people expressing that hurt. And that leaves the space open for someone to step in and say, I know you're hurting. Those other people are evil. And that's where we get to what we have now. And so we have to begin with the generosity and humility to listen to what people are actually harmed by. And so then we can, it's like a doctor doing a diagnosis. The history matters. The person might be saying, I know I have X malady, and the doctor knows that's not true. So they listen to the history like, oh, you have Y, and we can do this about Y. That's what we need to do from a policy perspective that might then help to alleviate that pain that could, it's never going to eliminate all of the anger and bitterness because we're humans, but it could at least diffuse some of that power.
Yes, I agree. What are some of the highlights of your campaign that you liked?
Yeah, well, one of them is, so there are 66,000 people in a House district in Pennsylvania, in each of our House districts, and 12,000 people voted for me. And I've met a lot of folks who were glad to be able to vote for something, not just against something. And so I take a lot out of that, and that we, the idea of not feeling alone and opening our mouths a little bit to find allies. Maybe this is a little narcissistic on my part, but like I came to know little nodes and communities of people in Crawford County, northwestern Pennsylvania, who do share the same values that I have, and that is very helpful for community building. So I really value that. I value as well that not all those people were Democrats, and that I had several Republicans who were really supportive, and so I could see that the political potential. And then even beyond that, there were people who I know didn't vote for me. And this is sort of a weird thing to take away as a positive, but that we could have conversations, and they weren't going to vote for me because the narrative storytelling of politics wouldn't allow a Republican to vote for a Democrat. But we could talk about farming, we could talk about land preservation, we could talk about health care even, and agree. And I see like the seeds of a positive future there, because folks know that politicians aren't generally helping them very much. And when they talk to other people, they start to recognize how we can help each other. And that means that there is a much more positive coalition future that can happen when we can start listening to each other again, and when we can get away from that political divide. So even though I got walloped in the election, as one would expect, I left it with actual hope. I made a concession video. A lot of stuff happened on video because of COVID, where like I use the phrase "never give up on goodness." I have it in the book too. I really recognize the inherent goodness of almost everybody around here and in the country and in the world, and that that gives us something to build on. We have to like make it clear that the vitriol is not who we are, and then we've got something.
Yes. I think, basically, I say this a lot on my show, people they want to live in peace. Yeah. They want to be able to put a roof over their head, feed their families, have a good paying job. That goes for both sides of the aisle. To be able to, save up for retirement, which seems impossible these days, but, health care. I know when people thought, oh, well, they talked about the, I don't know if it's called Obamacare anymore, but the government health care, universal maybe. They were thinking about that. They thought, oh, we're going to get what the people in Congress and Washington, D.C. get. No, we're not getting that, folks. I would like to have their plan.
Yeah. See, and like that's such an important point. It's like you can do it. You can actually have government paid for health care, because a lot of elected officials do. They just won't give it to everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to have their health care plan. Matt, would you run again?
So, like in a conceptual way, I would. In a personal way, no. And that has a lot to do with the emotional weight of running, and again, not just for myself, but for those around me. That the the conditions of politics are so toxic. I mean, you can imagine the insults and threats, including death threats, that I received as a candidate.
Oh my goodness!
Right?
That's terrible.
Especially when you're like, my platform is, hey, let's take care of each other. It didn't work out. So I don't intend to run in that context, but what I do intend to do is continuing to write and talk and recognize how politicians aren't doing political work. Politicians are about winning elections. We are doing political work as neighbors and coworkers, having the conversations that we have. That's actually our hope, and I would say writing the poems, painting the paintings, all of that is doing the work that helps us all desire a better future together. And so in that way, I will always be running for office or always be running to affect some kind of political change, but I don't anticipate seeing my name on a ballot again.
I would think that, especially from reading your book, but that you certainly learned a lot when you were running for office. What was some of the things you learned about America and Americans and running for office, other than getting death threats, which is awful, and insults? I mean, this is what I mean, Matt. Like, why do people have to be that way? If I don't agree with you, we have a right to agree to disagree, but for someone to threaten someone because they don't agree, that's just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Part of it is completely unsensible. The radical, empathetic part of me tries to recognize it as some are really afraid of the ideas that are coming forward because they've been convinced to be afraid of those ideas, and so they actually think they're defending something by attacking. And then there's like a long history of American righteousness through aggression, which is kind of a national trait that we really need to keep working on. That we do believe that fighting our way out of a problem is the best solution, and it often isn't. And that has literal and figurative violence issues. You had a question, and now I forget what the question was.
That's okay. What did you learn or teach? What did running for office teach you, other than there's a lot of weirdos out there?
Right. Certainly that. Or that was a confirmation. One of the things I learned, and it sounds a little bit negative, but I think it's not. I think it's neutral, and we just need to understand this, is I really learned directly how political parties function and what they're for, and why they are not going to be our way out of the political problem. Is that every part of elections is designed by the coalition of Republicans and Democrats, elected officials. So they're designing the mechanisms of our elections to favor themselves in the election. So, all the stuff people get upset about, like gerrymandering, as an example, that's kind of there. I mean, it is there by design, and it's often by agreement. And the abandonment that I experience as a rural Democrat is by design. It means that the Democratic Party doesn't need to, quote, waste their time and money campaigning here because they know that we don't mean anything statistically. And so what I really learned is that it has to come elsewhere, and that we have to create our solutions somewhere else. And that here's the hopeful part. Politicians will follow. Like, that's what they're designed to do. They're always going to follow the wind. And that's not a negative. That's just what the job is. And so if we can create the wind ourselves, if we can create that groundswell, and the Affordable Care Act is an interesting example of that, then we can actually have a different future. And what I think of with the Affordable Care Act is when it's called Obamacare, there's a lot of conservative folks who will oppose it who have it. When it's called the Affordable Care Act, they don't oppose it because they recognize what it has allowed them to have. And so that's the kind of wind I think we can create on a policy matter, is that politics is going to do what it's going to do. It's our job as citizens and neighbors to care about each other, and then the politicians will follow us.
And what was it like for you on election night when the results were coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I write a little bit about this very early in the book, that as I was setting my final signs at the polling
I lost
places,
you, Matt.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah, now I hear you.
Okay. There was a weird blip, I guess. When I was driving to the polling places on the night of the election, putting signs out in front of the polling places, the final set, and then retrieving them that night, before any returns were in, I knew that I had lost. I mean, I'd known that I'd lost for quite some time at that point, that there was no chance. And so I was sad on election night, not because I knew that I would lose, but because I knew that the period of time of me getting to talk about the stuff that mattered to me, and I think mattered to a lot of other people, was over. And then once the election was over, I actually felt really good, because I felt like one of the problems in places where one-party dominance is the thing is that the other party often doesn't even try. They don't run, or if they run like really weak campaigns. And I feel pride at having run a strong campaign in a losing effort, and that's what I take forward, is like, yeah, I'm going back to your idea of getting a bigger mouth. Like, I'm glad that I had a bigger mouth, and that that I was able to do that. And I'm disappointed that what we have remains what we have in political representation, but I'm happy that other people are doing the work, and there's a lot of other people stepping up. Like our city council has stepped up in a big way for renters' rights here is one of the primary things, and that's what gives me hope.
What would you like the reader to take away from your book, Matt?
Primarily that rural America is not what most people think it is, and that if you aren't from there, you have stereotypes and stories that have been delivered through literally hundreds of years of American storytelling about what it means to be rural, and that's not true. That rural America is much bigger than people think it is in concept, in value, and that as much as I don't like how a certain strain of conservatism has overtaken rural places, I also don't like that American liberal thought tends to discard rural America and think that there is no value there, no political value there. And my audience, I don't think many very conservative people would read or be interested in my book, but I think that people who aren't from rural places, who are Democrats or liberal-minded, I want them to read it and think, oh, yeah, maybe I've been a little bit too quick to toss out the capacity of the folks who live in the places that we call flyover country.
Well, I enjoyed your book. I thought it was very eye-opening for me, because I really didn't know about rural America. I grew up in New Jersey. Yeah. I lived in Tennessee for 3 years, so I really, didn't know much about that part of the country. So I thought your book was, to me, my opinion, very educational.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Really opened up my eyes. And, that's what I love about being a talk show host. I get to read these books. I get to talk to different people, and I learn. I learn from every book that I read. I learn from every guest. And that's what I tell people, have an open mind.
Yeah.
And, learn about other people, why they, think what they think, and just to show our humanity to each other again. That's what I like to see. But, thank you, Matthew, for coming on. Where can people buy your book and connect with you?
So to buy it, great thing to do is just go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it, or you can go to WVU Press Online. That's the publisher. My website is, there's a couple of different ways to get there, but we'll go with readferrence.com, READFERRENCE.
Oh, okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Matthew Ferrence, for coming on. Folks, you heard Matthew Ferrence, and he talked about his book, I Hate It Here. Please vote for me, Essays on Rural Political Decay. Folks, get the book and read it. If you know anyone interested in politics, get in the book. The holiday time is coming. And I think it's great. I really think it's a good thing to know another person's opinion, know the other person's side. Don't be so narrow-minded. Oh, they're a Democrat, so I can't, like them or her or read this or that. Just have an open mind. Think for yourselves. And that's what I would like to see, Matt. I would like to see people think for themselves and not go by what someone else says about another person. I was brought up in a Democrat home. My parents from World War II time, and I was always considered myself an independent. I didn't vote for necessarily the party, but the person and what they said they were going to do. Yeah. So I told my dad he didn't like that. I'm an independent, and don't tell me how to vote.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we all should cultivate our independent mind, and that is absolutely how we break out of it.
Well, thank you so much again, Matthew. I enjoyed talking to you very much. Folks, all the information about Matthew Ferrence will be in a blog that Jeannie White writes. Jeannie's the station manager, produces the show. And Lillian Colwell is the CEO of Pastoral Talk Radio Network. It makes this all possible. And I want to thank everyone for listening. Please share this show. Tell your friends about it. I'm here to be a resource to help people. And I thank you all again for listening and subscribing. And if you don't already subscribe, it is for free. Chatting with Betsy on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Music, just to name a few. And I have phenomenal guests coming on for the rest of the year and actually early next year. I'm already almost booked for March, so I'm busy here and have great guests lined up that you will not want to miss. And I also have two quick public service announcements. November is upon us, and it is Alzheimer's Awareness Month in November. If you have any memory concerns, please consult your primary care doctor. It's also National Caregivers Month. Please, if you know a caregiver, please reach out to them. Send a text. Let them know you're thinking of them. They would deeply appreciate it. How do I know that? Because I was a caregiver, and I appreciated when people reach out to me. It makes them feel that they're not abandoned, that they're not isolated. So please reach out to caregivers all the time, but especially next month. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Pastoral Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Be safe. Bye-bye.